When Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone was released in 2001, the film introduced the world to a young cast that would become synonymous with their characters for an entire decade. The casting process was extensive, with the filmmakers needing to balance faithful representation of beloved characters from the books with finding children who could grow into the roles as the series progressed. In many ways, the casting choices shaped not only the film's success, but also the long-term careers of its stars. Daniel Radcliffe was chosen to play Harry Potter after an extensive search. Prior to this film, Radcliffe had only a small amount of experience in front of the camera, most notably appearing in the BBC adaptation of David Copperfield and the film The Tailor of Panama. He was not yet a household name, but his natural sense of wonder and quiet vulnerability fit the role of the boy wizard. The role defined his career, making him instantly recognizable worldwide. For Radcliffe, the challenge was not just portraying a young boy discovering magic, but also embodying the character's deep sense of isolation and courage. Harry's longing for belonging and his natural bravery resonated with audiences, and Radcliffe grew into the role as the series advanced. After the franchise ended, he deliberately chose unconventional and diverse roles in projects like the stage play Equus, the horror film The Woman in Black, and later films such as Swiss Army Man and Guns Akimbo. The trajectory of his career demonstrates how the success of Sorcerer's Stone opened opportunities, while also creating the challenge of moving beyond the image of Harry Potter. Emma Watson was cast as Hermione Granger, a character defined by intelligence, determination, and moral conviction. Prior to Harry Potter, Watson had no professional acting credits. She had only performed in school plays. Her casting was considered something of a gamble, but it paid off tremendously. Watson's portrayal of Hermione gave the character a balance of warmth and sharp wit, turning her into a role model for young audiences worldwide. The character's advocacy for learning, bravery, and compassion resonated strongly with girls, many of whom saw Hermione as a heroine in her own right. For Watson, the impact of Sorcerer's Stone was transformative. She became an international star, but like Radcliffe, she sought to broaden her horizons after the franchise. She pursued higher education at Brown University, proving her off-screen dedication to learning mirrored Hermione's traits. In her post-Potter career, she starred in films like The Perks of Being a Wallflower, The Bling Ring, and Disney's live-action Beauty and the Beast. Beyond acting, Watson became an ambassador for women, advocating for gender equality. The launch of the He for She campaign showcased how the platform given to her by Sorcerer's Stone allowed her to transform into a cultural figure whose influence extended beyond cinema. Rupert Grint played Ron Weasley, the loyal and sometimes insecure best friend of Harry. Like Watson, Grint had no professional acting experience before this role. He won the part after sending in a humorous audition tape that highlighted his comedic timing. Ron Weasley provided much of the comic relief in Sorcerer's Stone, but also embodied themes of loyalty, bravery, and the struggle to step out of the shadow of others. Grint's natural warmth and relatability allowed audiences to connect with Ron, who is often portrayed as an everyman among the trio. After the conclusion of the series, Grint explored smaller film projects, stage work, and television roles, including the series Servant and Sick Note. While his career did not reach the same international prominence as Radcliffe or Watson, he maintained a steady presence in entertainment, with many fans appreciating his understated performances. The role of Ron not only made him globally recognized but also allowed him to show a wide range of emotions across the films, something Sorcerer's Stone laid the foundation for. Outside the trio, Sorcerer's Stone also featured an extraordinary ensemble of seasoned British actors who lent gravitas to the film. Richard Harris portrayed Albus Dumbledore, the wise and gentle headmaster of Hogwarts. Harris was already an established actor with decades of work, including iconic roles in Camelot, This Sporting Life, and Gladiator. His portrayal of Dumbledore was marked by warmth and authority, though tinged with a sense of mystery. Sorcerer's Stone would be one of his final performances, as he passed away in 2002, leading to a recasting of the role. Nonetheless, his interpretation of Dumbledore remains memorable for its gentleness and twinkling charm. Maggie Smith played Professor McGonagall, another crucial authority figure at Hogwarts. Already one of Britain's most respected actresses, Smith had a long list of accolades and was recognized for roles in films such as The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie and The Secret Garden. Her portrayal of McGonagall balanced strictness with compassion, providing both comic relief and moral grounding. The film introduced Smith to a new generation of fans, many of whom would later continue following her career into projects such as Downton Abbey. Alan Rickman's role as Professor Severus Snape was one of the most significant castings in the entire series. Rickman was a celebrated actor known for roles in Die Hard, Sense and Sensibility, and Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. In Sorcerer's Stone, his cold demeanor, sharp delivery, and enigmatic presence added layers of tension and mystery to the story. Audiences were captivated by Rickman's performance, which became one of the most enduring aspects of the franchise. While Rickman was already well respected, his role as Snape cemented his place in popular culture as one of cinema's most iconic characters. The film also included other strong performances from actors such as Robbie Coltrane as Hagrid, who brought warmth and humor to the half-giant caretaker. Coltrane was known for his work in the Cracker series and various film roles, and Hagrid became one of his most beloved portrayals. Richard Griffiths and Fiona Shaw played Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia, whose stern and cruel treatment of Harry set the stage for his journey. Both were acclaimed stage and film actors, and their performances gave authenticity to the early scenes. When Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone premiered in 2001, it was not simply the adaptation of a best-selling novel, but the launch of a cultural phenomenon that would dominate the early 21st century. The book series was already enormously popular, yet translating it into a film extended its reach to audiences who had never read the novels and turned it into one of the defining cultural touchstones of a generation. The release of the first film was more than just a cinematic event. It became a social milestone that influenced fashion, entertainment, childhood play, education, media, and even conversations about morality and politics. One of the most immediate cultural impacts was the normalization of fantasy within mainstream cinema. While fantasy had always had a place in film, it was often considered niche or relegated to cult audiences. Sorcerer's Stone, however, was released to enormous anticipation, breaking box office records and proving that fantasy stories with elaborate world-building could command mainstream appeal. This success helped pave the way for other franchises like the Lord of the Rings trilogy, the Chronicles of Narnia, and even later superhero franchises that relied heavily on fantastical elements. The movie also reinforced the idea of serialized storytelling within film. Audiences knew from the start that this was only the beginning of a larger story. Instead of being a one-off adaptation, Sorcerer's Stone marked the opening chapter in a cinematic saga that would span a decade. The sense of continuity and anticipation for sequels mirrored the excitement fans felt when awaiting each new book release. This model of long-form franchise storytelling set a standard for the film industry that continues today, influencing the structure of franchises like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Beyond cinema, the cultural footprint of Sorcerer's Stone was visible in countless aspects of everyday life. Children and teenagers embraced Harry Potter as part of their identity. Halloween costumes of Harry, Hermione, and Ron became nearly ubiquitous in the early 2000s. Classrooms adopted Harry Potter-themed decorations, and even libraries saw a surge in young readers eager to dive into fantasy literature. The film reinforced the book's ability to make reading fashionable again, encouraging reluctant readers to pick up novels not just from the Harry Potter series, but also other works of fantasy and adventure. The characters themselves became cultural archetypes. Harry symbolized the chosen one, the orphaned hero who struggles with destiny and moral responsibility. Hermione represented intelligence, hard work, and advocacy for fairness, inspiring many young girls to embrace education and leadership. Ron stood for loyalty, humor, and the value of friendship even when overshadowed by more extraordinary companions. These archetypes transcended the page and screen, appearing in countless memes, references, and even parodies in other films and television shows. The cultural impact also extended into language. Phrases like, "You're a wizard, Harry," and "the boy who lived" quickly became part of popular lexicon. Terms such as Muggle and Quidditch entered everyday speech, used both playfully and seriously. Schools and universities even created Quidditch leagues, adapting the fictional sport into a real-world game with broomsticks, tournaments, and international competitions. This transformation of fictional terms into cultural realities highlighted the power of the franchise to blur the boundaries between imagination and everyday experience. Sorcerer's Stone also influenced fashion and style. The distinctive Hogwarts robes, scarves in house colors, and round glasses became instantly recognizable symbols of fandom. The film's costume design created a visual template that fans eagerly imitated. Merchandise sales reflected this, with wizard hats, wands, and house scarves flying off the shelves in the years following the release. The fashion was not confined to children. Teenagers and adults also embraced subtle nods to Hogwarts houses in their clothing choices, signaling their identity as part of the global Harry Potter community. Socially, the film resonated with a generation that was coming of age in a rapidly changing world. The early 2000s were marked by technological growth, increasing globalization, and political upheaval. In the aftermath of events like September 11, 2001, audiences were drawn to stories of good versus evil, courage against darkness, and the importance of unity. Sorcerer's Stone, though primarily a children's film, carried themes of resilience, friendship, and moral choices that felt particularly relevant in uncertain times. For many young viewers, Hogwarts was more than just a school of magic. It was a safe space of belonging, imagination, and hope. Politically and socially, the film sparked debates about morality, religion, and education. Some religious groups criticized the film for its depiction of witchcraft, claiming it promoted occultism. However, for many others, the film was celebrated as a moral tale that emphasized courage, compassion, and standing against injustice. Educators used the story to teach lessons about ethics, tolerance, and inclusivity, with Hogwarts serving as a metaphorical classroom for exploring real-world issues of prejudice and acceptance. The film's impact was also evident in its global reach. Sorcerer's Stone was a truly international phenomenon, appealing to audiences across cultures and languages. The universality of its themes made it accessible to viewers everywhere. While certain elements were distinctly British, such as the boarding school setting and the humor, the core narrative of a child discovering hidden potential spoke to universal human experiences. This global resonance helped turn the film into a cultural bridge, uniting fans across borders and languages. In terms of media influence, Sorcerer's Stone became a frequent reference point in television shows, movies, and even political commentary. Characters in sitcoms referenced Hogwarts houses, news outlets used Harry Potter as shorthand for stories about magic or young people, and late-night comedy often parroted elements from the film. The imagery of Harry Potter's world became part of the shared cultural imagination, with references instantly recognizable even to those who had not read the books or seen the films. The movie also had a lasting impact on fandom culture. Sorcerer's Stone coincided with the early rise of the internet as a place for fan communities to gather. Online forums, fan fiction sites, and role-playing communities blossomed around the release of the film. Fans debated casting choices, theorized about future plotlines, and even wrote elaborate alternate stories. This participatory fan culture set the stage for how fandoms would operate in the digital age, with Harry Potter leading the way as one of the most significant examples of online fan engagement. Financially, the film demonstrated the power of media franchises to dominate markets beyond cinema. Toy sales, video games, and themed products exploded in popularity, creating a merchandising empire that rivaled Star Wars. The film's release also contributed to the eventual creation of theme park attractions, most notably the Wizarding World of Harry Potter, where fans could immerse themselves physically in the settings first brought to life on screen. The making of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone was a massive undertaking that required careful planning, an enormous budget, and a creative team capable of bringing one of the most beloved literary worlds to life. The pressure was immense. Fans of the books were deeply invested in the details, and the filmmakers had to balance staying faithful to the source material while also creating a cinematic experience that would captivate global audiences. The behind-the-scenes story of the film is filled with fascinating production decisions, challenges, and anecdotes that shaped its final form. The director chosen to lead the project was Chris Columbus, known for family-oriented films such as Home Alone, Mrs. Doubtfire, and Adventures in Babysitting. Warner Brothers selected him because of his proven ability to work with children and his track record in crafting heartfelt, commercially successful movies. Columbus approached the project with enthusiasm and a clear understanding of the responsibility. He aimed to create a film that respected the tone of J.K. Rowling's novel while appealing to families worldwide. His vision was to keep the magical world whimsical and welcoming, a decision that distinguished Sorcerer's Stone from later entries in the series, which grew progressively darker. The casting process was one of the earliest and most significant challenges. The filmmakers needed children who could not only embody the essence of Harry, Ron, and Hermione, but also handle the pressures of growing up in front of the world's cameras. Daniel Radcliffe was famously discovered after producer David Heyman saw him in a theater production and was struck by his suitability for the role. Radcliffe's parents were initially hesitant, worried about the long-term commitment, but eventually agreed after being assured of support. Rupert Grint secured the role of Ron by sending a quirky video audition, while Emma Watson impressed with her natural charisma and intelligence, despite having no professional experience. Beyond the child leads, the filmmakers sought out an ensemble of established British actors to lend authenticity and gravitas to the magical world. Alan Rickman, Maggie Smith, and Richard Harris were cast as key faculty members, with their performances elevating the credibility of the story. Robbie Coltrane was specifically requested by Rowling for the role of Hagrid, as she had envisioned him while writing the books. The inclusion of such respected actors reassured both fans and critics that the film was being handled with care. Once the cast was assembled, filming began in September 2000 and lasted until spring 2001. Many of the iconic locations were shot at real-world places across England. Gloucester Cathedral, Durham Cathedral, and Oxford's Christ Church College were among the historic buildings used to represent Hogwarts interiors. The Great Hall, however, was constructed on a soundstage at Leaves' Den Studios, a space that would later become synonymous with the franchise. The set was meticulously detailed, complete with floating candles and long house tables, instantly becoming one of the film's most iconic backdrops. Shooting with young actors presented unique challenges. British law restricted the number of hours children could work on set each day. This meant that filming schedules had to be tightly coordinated, with lessons built into the day to ensure the young cast met educational requirements. The filmmakers often had to use creative methods to keep the children focused during long shoots. Chris Columbus became known for his patience and ability to coax natural performances out of the inexperienced actors, though it sometimes required multiple takes to get the desired result. Another behind-the-scenes story involves the costume and prop design. The team wanted the world to feel magical, yet grounded. The wands were designed with individual characteristics tailored to the personality of each character. Hogwarts uniforms were crafted to look like traditional British school attire, but with subtle magical touches. The Sorting Hat, a pivotal prop, was brought to life through animatronics and digital effects, requiring careful coordination between the VFX team and actors. Special effects were one of the most ambitious aspects of the production. In 2001, computer-generated imagery was still developing, and the filmmakers had to strike a balance between practical effects and digital enhancements. The Quidditch scenes, for example, required extensive use of green screens, with actors mounted on broomsticks attached to rigs that simulated movement. The combination of digital effects and practical stunt work created sequences that thrilled audiences, even if the technology now appears slightly dated compared to later films. Hagrid's size posed another challenge. Robbie Coltrane played the role, but to achieve the character's half-giant proportions, the filmmakers used a combination of camera tricks, body doubles, and animatronics. A large animatronic head was built for wide shots, while oversized sets were constructed to make Coltrane appear much larger than his co-stars. The attention to detail ensured that Hagrid felt both magical and believable, avoiding the pitfalls of looking cartoonish. One amusing anecdote involves the food used in the Great Hall scenes. To make the feast look authentic, The crew initially used real food. However, under the hot studio lights, the food quickly spoiled, creating an unpleasant smell. For later scenes, they switched to resin replicas and carefully prepared dishes that could withstand long shooting days. Even so, the sheer scale of the Great Hall feasts required an enormous effort from the art department. Sound design was another behind-the-scenes element that shaped the film's atmosphere. The magical world needed to sound enchanting, from the swish of a wand to the flap of owl wings. Foley artists created unique soundscapes to match the visuals, giving life to magical objects and creatures. The iconic sound of spells being cast, for example, was achieved by blending electronic tones with everyday objects being manipulated in creative ways. John Williams' musical score was recorded with a full orchestra, with the theme, Hedwig's theme, becoming instantly recognizable worldwide. Behind the scenes, Williams worked closely with the filmmakers to ensure the music enhanced the magical atmosphere without overwhelming the performances. His ability to create melodies that evoked wonder, mystery, and adventure contributed significantly to the film's enduring appeal. The production also faced time pressures. Warner Brothers wanted the film released in November 2001 to capitalize on the holiday season. This meant post-production had only a few months to complete visual effects, sound, and editing. Despite the tight schedule, the team managed to deliver a polished final product. Editor Richard Francis Bruce carefully balanced the pacing, ensuring the story unfolded in a way that captured both the whimsical charm of the book and the cinematic need for momentum. The crew faced some difficulties with weather during location shoots. Filming in England's historic sites often meant dealing with cold, damp conditions. Child actors had to perform in drafty cathedrals or outdoor courtyards, sometimes requiring breaks to keep warm. The commitment of the cast and crew ensured these challenges did not disrupt production, though it added to the behind-the-scenes struggles. Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone follows a classic narrative arc that blends elements of the hero's journey, coming-of-age story, and mystery adventure. The plot structure is straightforward yet layered, designed to introduce audiences to the magical world while establishing characters, themes, and conflicts that would echo throughout the entire series. While the book already provided a solid framework, the film adaptation had to condense and shape the narrative for cinema. The result is a film that feels both faithful to its source material and paced for the rhythms of family entertainment. The story begins with a prologue set on Privet Drive, introducing the audience to the Dursleys and the infant Harry Potter. The mysterious arrival of Albus Dumbledore, Professor McGonagall, and Hagrid establishes a tone of secrecy and wonder. This opening sequence is crucial for narrative structure because it grounds the story in Harry's origin as the boy who lived. The baby left on a doorstep after surviving an attack by the dark wizard Voldemort sets up the central mystery of Harry's past, a thread that drives not just this film but the entire saga. The narrative then shifts to Harry's childhood with the Dursleys, establishing his life of neglect and mistreatment. This section of the film introduces the theme of isolation and the yearning for belonging. Harry is presented as an underdog figure, timid, unloved, and marginalized, making his discovery of magic all the more transformative. Structurally, this segment of the plot functions as the ordinary world in Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, where the protagonist begins in a mundane setting before being called to adventure. The arrival of Hagrid and the revelation that Harry is a wizard serve as the inciting incident, propelling the narrative forward. Hagrid's introduction is not only a plot device but also a tonal shift, moving the story from dreary realism into wonder and adventure. This moment transitions the film from Act 1 to Act 2, where Harry enters the magical world. The trip to Diagon Alley further cements this transition, serving as both exposition and spectacle. Here, the audience is introduced to the idea of a hidden magical society coexisting with the ordinary world. Key elements, such as Harry's wand, the concept of wizarding currency, and the first hints about the Sorcerer's Stone, are seated in this section. Boarding the Hogwarts Express marks another important structural beat. The train ride introduces Ron Weasley and Hermione Granger, who become central to Harry's journey. The formation of this trio is critical to the plot, as the friendship among the three characters underpins not only this film but the entire series. The narrative then shifts to Hogwarts, where the bulk of the story unfolds. The sorting ceremony provides an elegant way of establishing the different factions within the school, while also foreshadowing Harry's future conflict with Slytherin House and Draco Malfoy. The middle act of the film unfolds as a mixture of episodic adventures and character-building moments. The narrative uses the school year structure to guide pacing, moving from one significant moment to another. The first flying lesson, Harry's discovery of his talent for Quidditch, the troll in the dungeon, and the gradual unveiling of the mystery surrounding the Sorcerer's Stone. Each of these episodes not only provides entertainment, but also develops Harry's character. The flying lesson, for example, highlights Harry's bravery and skill, while the troll incident solidifies the trio's bond as friends. The overarching mystery is introduced through the character of Snape, who is positioned as the apparent villain. Structurally, this misdirection serves as the central conflict of the narrative. The audience, like Harry, is led to suspect Snape of trying to steal the stone. This classic red herring builds suspense and creates tension between Harry and authority figures within the school. Meanwhile, subtle clues are sprinkled throughout the film that point to Quirrell as the real antagonist, though these are only fully revealed at the climax. Quidditch serves as both a subplot and a metaphor for Harry's integration into the magical world. The matches provide action and spectacle while reinforcing Harry's identity as someone special. His success on the Quidditch pitch is an externalization of his growth in confidence and his gradual acceptance of his place in this new world. Structurally, Quidditch scenes are strategically placed to break up exposition-heavy moments and to keep the film dynamic. The narrative builds toward the central mystery surrounding the Sorcerer's Stone. Harry, Ron, and Hermione gradually piece together the clues: Hagrid's dragon egg, the three-headed dog guarding the trapdoor, and the challenges designed to protect the stone. This structure mirrors that of a detective story, with young protagonists uncovering secrets hidden beneath the surface of their world. The episodic mysteries function as stepping stones toward the climactic revelation. The third act begins when the trio decides to take matters into their own hands and pursue the stone. This decision marks the moment when the children fully embrace their roles as heroes. The sequence of challenges they face is significant not just as action set pieces, but as tests of character. Hermione's logic puzzle highlights her intelligence and resourcefulness, Ron's chess game demonstrates his strategic mind and bravery, and Harry's willingness to face Quirrell alone underscores his courage. Narratively, this structure reinforces the idea that their combined strengths make them successful, rather than any single one of them being the sole hero. The climax reveals Quirrell as the true antagonist and unveils Voldemort's presence, hidden within Quirrell's body. This twist recontextualizes the earlier misdirection involving Snape, rewarding attentive viewers while surprising those who had assumed Snape was guilty. The confrontation with Quirrell also provides Harry with his first direct encounter with Voldemort since infancy. This battle is both physical and symbolic. Harry defeats Quirrell not through brute force, but through his mother's protective love, a thematic element that resonates throughout the series. The resolution of the story ties back to the themes of friendship and belonging. Dumbledore's awarding of house points to Gryffindor not only gives the trio public recognition but also affirms the value of their courage and loyalty. Harry's return to the Dursleys for the summer creates a cyclical structure, bringing the narrative back to where it began but with a profound difference. Harry now has a sense of identity, community, and purpose. The ending strikes a balance between closure and anticipation, leaving the audience satisfied but eager for the next installment. From a structural perspective, the film is carefully crafted to balance world-building with character development and plot progression. The episodic nature of the middle act allows the audience to explore Hogwarts as Harry does, while the overarching mystery provides cohesion. This structure reflects the dual function of the film, as an introduction to a vast magical universe and as a self-contained story of adventure and discovery. Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone may at first seem like a simple children's fantasy adventure, but beneath its magical surface lies a network of themes and symbols that enrich the narrative and give it resonance across generations. These themes help explain why the story has endured in popular culture for decades. The film uses archetypal storytelling, mythological references, and symbolic imagery to explore issues of identity, morality, friendship, and the struggle between good and evil. Many of these ideas are introduced in subtle ways, setting the foundation for the deeper and more complex themes explored in later installments. One of the central themes of the film is identity and self-discovery. Harry begins the story as a boy who knows almost nothing about his true heritage. He is defined by neglect, living in a cupboard under the stairs, treated as an outsider in his own home. When he learns he is a wizard, his life transforms, but the theme of discovering who he really is continues throughout the film. His time at Hogwarts is not only about learning spells, but also about uncovering his place in the magical world. Symbolically, the Sorting Hat scene captures this perfectly. Harry's choice to reject Slytherin in favor of Gryffindor illustrates the idea that identity is shaped not by destiny or bloodline, but by personal choices. This theme speaks to audiences of all ages, particularly children, who are themselves discovering their sense of self. Another prominent theme is friendship and loyalty. The trio of Harry, Ron, and Hermione demonstrates how differences in personality and background can strengthen rather than weaken bonds. Hermione is logical and disciplined, Ron is humorous and loyal, and Harry is brave and instinctive. Together, they embody the idea that friendship is built on complementarity and trust. The troll scene is a symbolic turning point, showing that true friendship often arises in moments of danger and sacrifice. By risking their safety for one another, the characters solidify their bond, demonstrating that loyalty and companionship are more powerful than individual skill alone. Family and belonging are also crucial themes. Harry's early life with the Dursleys symbolizes neglect and alienation, while his experiences at Hogwarts symbolize acceptance and community. Hogwarts itself functions as a symbolic home, offering Harry the love and support he never received from his biological relatives. Dumbledore, Hagrid, and even McGonagall act as surrogate parental figures, filling the void left by Harry's lost parents. This theme resonates deeply with audiences because it suggests that family is not defined solely by blood, but by the bonds of love, care, and shared values. The Mirror of Eris sequence symbolizes Harry's longing for family, showing his deepest desire to be reunited with his parents. It also reinforces the theme of loss, underscoring how personal grief can shape one's journey. The theme of good versus evil runs throughout the film, though it is presented in a way accessible to younger audiences. Voldemort embodies pure evil, greed, and the lust for power, while Harry represents innocence, courage, and the moral strength to resist corruption. Yet the film avoids presenting the struggle in overly simplistic terms. The Sorting Hat suggestion that Harry would do well in Slytherin highlights the potential for darkness within him, suggesting that the line between good and evil is not absolute. This moral ambiguity becomes central to the larger series, but even in Sorcerer's Stone, the seeds are planted. Individuals must make choices that define their character. The pursuit of knowledge is another theme woven throughout the narrative. Hermione's love of books and learning is portrayed as a strength rather than a weakness. The trio's success in navigating the challenges guarding the Sorcerer's Stone comes not from brute force, but from intellect, problem-solving, and collaboration. At the same time, the film warns against the misuse of knowledge. Quirrell's pursuit of forbidden knowledge leads to his downfall, showing that wisdom must be tempered with morality. In this sense, Hogwarts symbolizes not just a school of magic, but the broader concept of education as a means of personal growth and ethical responsibility. Power and greed are symbolized most directly by the Sorcerer's Stone itself. The stone, which grants immortality and unlimited wealth, represents the ultimate temptation. Its allure is not only physical but also symbolic of humanity's desire to control fate and avoid mortality. Voldemort's attempt to obtain the stone underscores his fear of death and obsession with dominance. In contrast, Dumbledore's decision to destroy the stone reflects the theme that the pursuit of immortality and absolute power is ultimately corrupting. Symbolically, the stone teaches the lesson that mortality and human limitations are natural and meaningful, while the desire to transcend them leads to destruction. Courage and bravery are constant themes, embodied by the values of Gryffindor House. Harry's bravery is not portrayed as fearlessness, but rather the ability to act despite fear. Ron's decision to sacrifice himself in the chess game, Hermione's determination to stay calm and think logically under pressure, and Harry's willingness to face Quirrell and Voldemort alone all serve as symbolic demonstrations of courage. These moments emphasize that bravery takes many forms, from physical risk to intellectual problem-solving and emotional resilience. Prejudice and inclusivity also surface in the narrative, particularly in the way characters discuss blood status. Hermione is labeled a mudblood in later installments, but even in Sorcerer's Stone, the divide between pureblood wizards and Muggleborns is hinted at. Draco Malfoy symbolizes elitism and prejudice, while Hermione's acceptance into Hogwarts demonstrates inclusivity and meritocracy. This theme mirrors real-world struggles against discrimination, reinforcing the message that one's worth is defined by actions and character rather than heritage. Symbolism permeates the film beyond its themes. The lightning bolt scar on Harry's forehead is not just a physical mark, but a symbol of survival, destiny, and the enduring connection between him and Voldemort. It serves as a visual reminder of his past trauma and future challenges. Similarly, animals are used symbolically throughout the film. Owls represent wisdom and magical communication, while the three-headed dog guarding the stone symbolizes the obstacles between humanity and temptation. Even Quidditch can be seen as symbolic. It represents freedom, competition, and the thrill of self-discovery, serving as an externalization of Harry's internal growth. The Mirror of Erised is perhaps the most profound symbol in the film. It reflects not reality but desire, showing characters what they most long for. For Harry, it reveals his yearning for family, while for Quirrell and Voldemort, it represents ambition and greed. The mirror symbolizes the human struggle between desire and reality, warning that obsession with what we wish for can trap us. Dumbledore's explanation that it does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live encapsulates the lesson that one must balance desire with acceptance of reality. The visual style of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone is one of the film's defining qualities. In order to bring a beloved literary world to life, the filmmakers needed to craft a style that captured the wonder, mystery, and warmth of the books while also creating something that worked on screen. Cinematographer John Seale, along with director Chris Columbus, designed an approach that combined classical filmmaking techniques with emerging digital technologies. The result was a visual language that felt timeless yet modern, grounding the magical world in a sense of reality while also highlighting its fantastical elements. One of the most striking aspects of the film's visual style is its use of lighting. The film deliberately shifts lighting schemes depending on the setting. The Dursleys' home on Privet Drive is lit in muted, flat tones that emphasize the dullness and suffocating normalcy of Harry's early life. Colors are subdued, and the lighting is harsh, reinforcing the sense of neglect and isolation. In contrast, Diagon Alley bursts with color and warmth, bathed in golden hues and intricate details. The shift in lighting mirrors Harry's emotional journey from a gray, joyless existence into a vibrant world of possibility. Hogwarts itself is presented with a combination of grandeur and coziness. The Great Hall is lit with flickering candlelight and warm tones, evoking both majesty and comfort. Shadows are used effectively in the castle's corridors, creating a sense of mystery and danger while maintaining the Gothic atmosphere of the architecture. The contrast between the warm interiors and the shadowy corners of the castle reflects the dual nature of Hogwarts as both a place of safety and a place where dark secrets lurk. The color palette of the film is carefully chosen to reinforce themes and moods. Gryffindor scenes are often dominated by warm reds and golds, reflecting courage and friendship. Slytherin scenes lean toward greens and darker tones, symbolizing ambition, secrecy, and menace. The Quidditch matches explode with primary colors, emphasizing excitement and competition. Even subtle details, such as the purple tones in Dumbledore's robes or the earthy browns of Hagrid's hut, contribute to the overall sense of a world both fantastical and grounded in meaning. Camera work is another key element in shaping the film's tone. John Seale employs a classical style of cinematography, relying on steady framing and smooth camera movements rather than experimental techniques. This approach suits the story's tone, allowing the magical elements to speak for themselves without overwhelming the audience with visual trickery. Wide establishing shots are frequently used to showcase the grandeur of Hogwarts, Diagon Alley, and other magical locations. These shots allow the audience to take in the scope of the world, making the setting a character in its own right. At the same time, close-ups are used effectively to capture the emotional nuances of the young actors. Because Radcliffe, Watson, and Grint were inexperienced, the camera often lingers on their faces, allowing the audience to connect emotionally even when line delivery might lack polish. This decision helps the film succeed as a character-driven story, ensuring that the focus remains on Harry's journey rather than just the spectacle. The visual effects of Sorcerer's Stone were groundbreaking for their time, though later films in the series would surpass them with more advanced technology. Nonetheless, the film uses effects judiciously to create wonder without relying on them excessively. The Quidditch sequences, for example, combine live-action footage with digital effects, using dynamic camera angles to simulate the sensation of flying. Sweeping aerial shots during Quidditch games create energy and excitement, while tighter shots on Harry's face emphasize his emotions and reactions. The invisibility cloak sequence is another example of how visual effects blend with storytelling. The cloak's shimmering transparency was created through digital compositing, but the cinematography ensures that the scene remains intimate and tense. The choice of framing, long corridors, shadowy corners, and sudden reveals enhances the suspense as Harry sneaks through Hogwarts at night. Symbolism is often reinforced through visual motifs. Mirrors and reflections appear throughout the film, most notably in the Mirror of Eris sequence. The mirror itself is shot with soft, ethereal lighting, emphasizing its dreamlike quality. The choice of framing Harry alongside the ghostly reflections of his parents reinforces the emotional weight of the scene. The camera lingers on Harry's longing expression, underscoring the theme of desire and loss. Movement through space is another important element of the cinematography. The film frequently uses tracking shots to follow Harry as he explores new environments. When he first enters Diagon Alley, the camera sweeps around him, capturing his sense of wonder. Similar techniques are used when he first arrives at Hogwarts, with the camera gliding through the Great Hall to emphasize the grandeur of the space. These choices allow the audience to share Harry's perspective, experiencing the magical world through his eyes. The Gothic architecture of Hogwarts plays a major role in shaping the film's visual style. Towering arches, stone staircases, and stained-glass windows evoke a sense of history and tradition. The cinematography emphasizes verticality, often framing characters against towering structures to make them appear small within the vastness of the castle. This visual choice reinforces the idea that Harry and his friends are just beginning their journey in a world much larger than themselves. Practical effects and set design also contribute to the film's visual identity. The three-headed dog, Fluffy, was created using a combination of animatronics and digital enhancements. The cinematography emphasizes the creature's size and menace through low-angle shots, making the trio appear vulnerable in comparison. Similarly, the sequence with the giant chessboard uses dramatic lighting and wide framing to highlight the scale and danger of the challenge. The combination of practical sets and digital effects creates a sense of physicality that grounds the fantasy. Even smaller scenes are carefully composed to reinforce mood and theme. The Dursleys' dining table is shot with rigid, symmetrical framing, emphasizing their oppressive normalcy. In contrast, Hagrid's hut is filmed with cozy, uneven angles and warm lighting, symbolizing his eccentric but kind nature. These visual contrasts subtly communicate the differences between the mundane and magical worlds. The use of shadows and darkness is particularly effective in building tension. The Forbidden Forest sequence is shot with minimal light, relying on moonlight and fog to create an atmosphere of danger. The cinematography here emphasizes fear of the unknown, with Harry often framed against deep shadows. The reveal of Voldemort feeding on the unicorn is staged as a horror moment, with the use of silhouettes and backlighting making the figure appear grotesque and otherworldly. Music and sound design are as integral to the experience of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone as its visuals, performances, and story. Without sound, the world of Hogwarts would feel hollow, its magic less immersive and its emotions less powerful. The film's soundtrack, composed by John Williams, and its detailed sound design elevate the narrative into a fully realized sensory experience. Williams, already celebrated for his work on Star Wars, Indiana Jones, and Jurassic Park, brought to the film a style that was both classical and whimsical, perfectly capturing the mixture of childlike wonder and epic grandeur. Paired with the meticulous sound design from the production team, the film creates an auditory world that feels as alive as its visual counterpart. Perhaps the most iconic element of the soundtrack is Hedwig's theme, which has become synonymous not only with the film but with the entire Harry Potter franchise. The theme begins with a delicate celesta melody, its twinkling tones evoking magic, mystery, and innocence. This choice of instrument is deliberate, as the celesta has a bell-like quality that feels otherworldly yet gentle, reflecting the sense of wonder and discovery central to Harry's journey. As the theme develops, orchestral strings, brass, and percussion build around it, transforming what begins as fragile curiosity into sweeping grandeur. This musical progression mirrors Harry's transition from an ordinary boy to the hero of a magical world. The soundtrack consistently balances intimacy and spectacle. Quieter pieces underscore emotional or reflective moments, such as Harry discovering the mirror of Erist. In this sequence, the music is soft, almost mournful, with long, lingering string notes that capture Harry's longing for his parents. The simplicity of the score here allows the audience to feel the weight of his loss without being overwhelmed by dramatic flourishes. In contrast, action-driven sequences, like the Quidditch match or the underground challenges guarding the Sorcerer's Stone feature bold, energetic orchestration. Williams uses rapid string passages, dynamic brass, and pounding percussion to heighten the excitement, mirroring the intensity of the visuals. The Quidditch match provides a clear example of how the soundtrack adapts to shifts in tone within a single sequence. As the game begins, the music is playful, with lively woodwinds reflecting the joy of the spectacle. As the match intensifies and Harry faces danger from the rogue bludger, the score grows darker and more urgent, with dissonant harmonies and rapid rhythms. When Harry triumphs, the music resolves into triumphant fanfares, reinforcing the emotional payoff. This ability to track emotional shifts moment by moment is one of Williams' great strengths, and it ensures that the audience experiences the full roller coaster of emotions alongside the characters. Sound design plays an equally critical role in immersing the audience in the magical world. Every spell, creature, and artifact is accompanied by a distinct sound that makes it feel tangible. The swish and flick of wands produce crisp, sparkling effects that vary depending on the spell, reinforcing the idea that each incantation has its own unique energy. The sound of broomsticks cutting through the air during Quidditch adds physicality to the flying sequences, making them feel grounded even though they are fantastical. Creature sounds are another area where the sound design shines. Fluffy, the three-headed dog, has a deep, guttural growl layered with animal recordings to give it a monstrous, unnatural quality. The troll's footsteps echo heavily, each thud reverberating to emphasize its massive size and weight. In contrast, Hedwig's soft hoots and the chirping of other owls in the Ollery provide warmth and comfort, highlighting the magical creatures that embody friendship rather than danger. Environmental sounds also enhance the sense of place. Hogwarts is filled with subtle auditory cues: the crackling of fireplaces in common rooms, the creak of ancient wooden doors, the echo of footsteps in long corridors, and the murmur of students in the Great Hall. These ambient sounds create a living, breathing environment, grounding the fantasy in sensory detail. Without them, the castle might feel like a static backdrop rather than a vibrant, inhabited world. The Mirror of Erist sequence demonstrates how sound design and music work together to deepen meaning. As Harry looks into the mirror, the score is subdued, with delicate strings emphasizing emotion. Layered beneath the music are faint, almost imperceptible whispers, suggesting the mirror's mystical nature. This auditory detail reinforces the idea that the mirror is not merely an object, but something enchanted, alive with subtle power. Contrast is key in the film's use of sound. Moments of silence are used sparingly but effectively. When Harry first hears Hagrid knock down the Dursley's door, there is a brief pause in the score and ambient noise, making the booming knock all the more startling. In the Forbidden Forest, silence dominates the atmosphere, broken only by the eerie sounds of leaves rustling or twigs snapping underfoot. This minimal soundscape builds suspense, making the sudden introduction of Voldemort feeding on the unicorn all the more horrifying when paired with harsh, discordant sound effects. Dialogue also benefits from careful sound design. The acoustics of each setting are distinct. Conversations in the Great Hall echo slightly, emphasizing its cavernous space, while dialogue in common rooms is warmer and more intimate. This attention to spatial sound grounds the locations in a realistic sense of scale and texture. Another powerful example of sound design is in the climactic confrontation between Harry and Quirrell. When Voldemort's voice emerges from Quirrell's body, it has a ghostly, layered quality, combining rich low tones with eerie high frequencies. This design makes Voldemort sound both human and inhuman, reinforcing his status as something corrupted and unnatural. The sounds of Harry's touch burning Quirrell's skin are equally unsettling, a mix of sizzling and tearing effects that emphasize both the magical and physical consequences of their battle. One of John Williams' greatest achievements in this film is how he integrates leitmotifs, or recurring musical themes, into the score. Each major character or concept has a motif that recurs throughout the film. Hedwig's theme functions not just as a piece of main title music, but as a recurring motif for magic and wonder, appearing in varied forms during different scenes. Voldemort's presence is often underscored with darker, foreboding musical lines, foreshadowing his role as the overarching antagonist. These motifs create cohesion across the film and establish musical identities for the characters, making the soundtrack memorable and emotionally resonant. The balance between traditional orchestral scoring and modern sound design techniques gives Sorcerer's Stone its distinctive auditory identity. Williams' orchestration is rooted in classical traditions, drawing on influences from Romantic and early 20th century composers, but the sound effects incorporate cutting-edge technology of the early 2000s. This blend of timeless and contemporary mirrors the narrative's combination of an old-world magical setting with the timeless struggle of good versus evil. When Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone was released in November 2001, it was one of the most highly anticipated films of its time. The book series by J.K. Rowling had already become a global phenomenon, and expectations for the cinematic adaptation were enormous. Parents, children, critics, and industry professionals all wanted to see if Hollywood could successfully translate the magic of the books to the big screen. The reception was wide-ranging, encompassing glowing praise, constructive criticism, and in some cases, cultural debates about the franchise's larger implications. From a box office perspective, the film was an overwhelming success. It opened to record-breaking numbers, earning more than $90 million in its first weekend in the United States alone. It went on to gross nearly $1 billion worldwide, becoming one of the highest-grossing films of its time. These numbers demonstrated not only the strength of the source material's fanbase, but also the appeal of the film to audiences who had not read the books. The commercial triumph confirmed Warner Brothers had made the right choice in investing heavily in the series and set the stage for the 7 sequels that would follow. Critically, the film received generally positive reviews, though opinions varied in tone and emphasis. Many critics praised the film for its faithfulness to the source material, its casting, and its ability to bring Rowling's world to life. Daniel Radcliffe, Rupert Grint, and Emma Watson were lauded as promising newcomers who embodied their characters with charm and authenticity. Richard Harris, Maggie Smith, and Alan Rickman were especially singled out for lending gravitas and nuance to their roles, grounding the fantasy in strong performances. Another area that critics frequently highlighted was the film's production design and visual effects. The sets, from the Gothic grandeur of Hogwarts to the bustling wonder of Diagon Alley, were praised for their detail and imagination. Critics noted that these visuals provided a strong sense of place, allowing audiences to feel fully immersed in the magical world. The visual effects, though somewhat dated by today's standards, were cutting edge at the time, particularly in sequences like Quidditch and the Troll Battle. Many reviewers argued that these elements captured the spirit of the book's descriptions. However, some criticism focused on the film's length and pacing. At over 2.5 hours, Sorcerer's Stone was considered lengthy for a family film, and some argued that certain scenes dragged or that too much time was spent on exposition. Others felt that the film was too beholden to the book, replicating its structure almost scene for scene without taking enough creative liberties to adapt it fully for cinema. This faithfulness was praised by fans but critiqued by some critics as making the film feel episodic rather than fluid. The direction by Chris Columbus also generated mixed responses. Supporters argued that his straightforward, accessible style was the right choice for a children's fantasy, particularly given that this was the first entry in what would become a long-running series. They felt his focus on warmth, innocence, and wonder perfectly suited the story of Harry's introduction to the wizarding world. Detractors, however, claimed that his direction was overly safe and lacked the darker or more daring edge that could have made the film more artistically ambitious. Some critics predicted that later entries, perhaps under different directors, would need to push the visual and tonal boundaries further. This prediction proved accurate as subsequent films adopted darker tones and more complex visual storytelling. Audiences, however, were overwhelmingly enthusiastic. Children in particular embraced the film, many of them experiencing the story for the first time through cinema rather than the books. Parents often praised the movie for being family-friendly, yet engaging for adults as well. Theaters were filled with children wearing robes, glasses, and carrying wands, and the film became more than entertainment. It was an event that spanned generations. In terms of awards recognition, the film received several nominations. It was nominated for Academy Awards in categories such as Best Art Direction, Best Costume Design, and Best Original Score for John Williams' now iconic composition. While it did not win in these categories, the nominations reinforced the respect the film earned for its technical and artistic accomplishments. The British Academy Film Awards and other industry organizations also recognized the film in multiple categories. Of course, no cultural phenomenon comes without controversy or backlash. Some religious groups, particularly in the United States, criticized the film for promoting witchcraft and the occult. They argued that the magical elements might encourage children to explore real-world practices of sorcery or undermine traditional religious values. While these criticisms sparked debates in certain communities, they did little to diminish the film's popularity and often had the opposite effect, drawing more attention and curiosity to the series. Literary purists also expressed concern about what they saw as Hollywood's commodification of Rowling's work. Some critics worried that the film adaptation would overshadow the books, reducing their literary merit by packaging them primarily as entertainment. However, in practice, the film often served as a gateway for new readers, introducing millions of children to the novels and reinforcing their popularity. In this sense, the film and books had a symbiotic relationship rather than a destructive one. Cultural critics sometimes highlighted the film's representation and inclusivity. While the magical world is diverse in terms of creatures and beings, human representation in the first film was largely limited to white British actors. Some argued that this reflected the limitations of early 2000s mainstream fantasy cinema, which often failed to reflect global diversity. Later films in the franchise made small steps toward addressing this criticism, but the first film remained a product of its time in this regard. Another criticism leveled at the film was its reliance on archetypes and clichés. Some reviewers felt that certain characters, like the Dursleys or Draco Malfoy, were portrayed in overly simplistic ways, lacking nuance or depth. While fans often defended this as consistent with the tone of a children's story, critics argued that more subtle characterizations might have enriched the narrative. Despite these criticisms, the overall legacy of the reception was overwhelmingly positive. The combination of critical approval, audience adoration, and massive box office success established Sorcerer's Stone as a landmark in fantasy cinema. It proved that the Harry Potter franchise could succeed as a film series, paving the way for one of the most successful cinematic sagas in history. Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone did more than introduce audiences to a magical world. It changed the landscape of cinema, publishing, merchandising, and popular culture. The film's legacy extends beyond its immediate success at the box office and into long-term cultural influence, shaping how fantasy stories are adapted, marketed, and experienced. In many ways, this first entry laid the foundation for the 21st century's obsession with interconnected franchises, cinematic universes, and multimedia storytelling. One of the most significant aspects of the film's legacy is its role in proving that children's literature could be adapted into blockbuster cinema without losing its charm. Prior to Sorcerer's Stone, studios were cautious about investing heavily in films based on children's fantasy novels. While animated features had found success, live-action adaptations often struggled to balance whimsy with cinematic appeal. Sorcerer's Stone demonstrated that not only could such adaptations succeed, they could become global phenomena. This success paved the way for adaptations of other fantasy works, such as the Chronicles of Narnia films, and even influenced studios' willingness to take risks on sprawling sagas like the Percy Jackson series. Another crucial element of its influence lies in the establishment of long-form, serialized storytelling in mainstream blockbuster cinema. Before Harry Potter, major franchises like Star Wars and Indiana Jones had sequels, but each film tended to function as a relatively self-contained adventure. Sorcerer's Stone and the subsequent Potter films popularized the idea of a decade-long cinematic narrative with interconnected installments, each building on the last. This model heavily influenced later franchises like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which perfected the notion of interconnected storytelling across multiple films. The film's influence on the fantasy genre cannot be overstated. It brought back a seriousness and legitimacy to fantasy cinema at a time when the genre was often dismissed as niche or juvenile. Released the same year as The Fellowship of the Ring, Sorcerer's Stone helped create a renaissance for fantasy in the early 2000s. Suddenly, magical worlds and epic sagas were not just commercially viable, but also culturally dominant. Both children and adults embraced fantasy as mainstream entertainment, and studios scrambled to find the next big magical property. The legacy also extends to the careers of its cast and crew. Daniel Radcliffe, Rupert Grint, and Emma Watson grew up with the series, becoming global celebrities and role models for young fans. Alan Rickman's performance as Snape became iconic, often cited as one of the most memorable portrayals in fantasy cinema. Even smaller roles, such as Maggie Smith's McGonagall or Robbie Coltrane's Hagrid, became embedded in the cultural consciousness. For many actors, the series defined their careers, and their association with the franchise remains strong even decades later. Merchandising is another area where the film's legacy endures. From wands and robes to Lego sets and video games, the film helped spark a merchandising empire rivaled only by Star Wars. Warner Brothers quickly realized that Harry Potter was more than just a film series. It was a brand that could extend into nearly every corner of consumer culture. Toys, clothing, board games, and even candy modeled after Wizarding World treats became staples in households worldwide. The success of this merchandising strategy influenced how studios approached franchise building in the years that followed. The film also paved the way for theme park expansions and real-world experiences. Without the success of Sorcerer's Stone, Universal Studios' Wizarding World of Harry Potter might never have existed. The immersive parks, which recreate Diagon Alley, Hogwarts, and other beloved locations, owe their existence to the film's ability to bring these spaces vividly to life on screen. Millions of fans now flock to these attractions each year, blurring the line between cinema and lived experience. Another dimension of the film's legacy is its influence on an entire generation of audiences. For many children who grew up in the early 2000s, Sorcerer's Stone was their introduction to large-scale fantasy cinema. It became a shared cultural moment, a touchstone that shaped imaginations and sparked a love of reading, film, and storytelling. Many of those children grew into adults who now revisit the series with nostalgia, and some have passed it on to their own children, ensuring that the legacy continues across generations. The influence extended into education and reading culture as well. While the books themselves had already sparked a surge in children's reading, the film adaptation magnified that effect. Children who saw the movie but had not yet read the novels were often inspired to pick them up, broadening the book's reach even further. Teachers and librarians reported surges in interest, and Harry Potter became a tool for encouraging literacy and engagement with literature. The film thus contributed indirectly to one of the most significant reading movements in recent history. Critically, the legacy of Sorcerer's Stone is sometimes framed as laying the groundwork rather than being the artistic peak of the series. Many scholars and critics note that while the first film played it safe in tone and direction, this conservatism was necessary to establish the franchise's identity. Later entries could afford to take risks precisely because the first film had built such a strong foundation. Its legacy, therefore, lies not only in what it achieved on its own but in how it enabled the evolution of the series into darker, more mature territory. The film's influence also extends into the evolution of digital effects. While not flawless by modern standards, its blending of practical effects with computer-generated imagery set new benchmarks for family-friendly fantasy. Quidditch matches, troll battles, and magical creatures like Fluffy showed how visual effects could be used to bring literary imagination to life, without losing believability. The film inspired future productions to experiment with blending real sets and digital enhancements, helping to shape the visual language of fantasy cinema. Culturally, Sorcerer's Stone has become a symbol of early 2000s childhood. Memes, parodies, and references to the film continue to circulate online decades after its release. Lines like, "You're a wizard, Harry," or visual images of the Great Hall are instantly recognizable across cultures. In this sense, the film's influence transcends the screen, embedding itself in global cultural shorthand. The release of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone was more than just a cinematic event. It became a cultural moment that resonated differently with various groups of audiences around the world. The reflections and interpretations that viewers brought to the film reveal how deeply personal and widespread its impact was. For some, it was pure escapism, a portal into a world of magic and wonder. For others, it was a mirror reflecting themes of belonging, courage, and identity. The reactions of audiences across age groups, backgrounds, and cultures demonstrate how a single film could carry so many meanings at once, uniting millions under the banner of the wizarding world. For children, particularly those encountering the story for the first time through film rather than books, the experience was often described as life-changing. Many children related to Harry's feelings of being misunderstood or overlooked, especially in his early life with the Dursleys. The fantasy of suddenly discovering that one is special, chosen, and destined for greatness resonated strongly with young audiences. This identification with Harry gave the film an emotional weight beyond its surface-level adventure. Children could imagine themselves receiving a letter from Hogwarts, embarking on their own magical journey, and finding a place where they truly belonged. Parents reflected differently. For them, the film was not only an entertaining family outing but also an opportunity to revisit childhood wonder. Many adults were surprised by how emotionally engaging the story was, even though it was marketed primarily as children's entertainment. Themes of family, loss, and love struck chords with parents who saw in Harry's struggles echoes of their own fears for their children. Parents also interpreted the film as a moral tale, with lessons about bravery, friendship, and integrity that they could share with their families. For some, it became a bonding experience, as parents and children could enjoy the story together and then discuss its deeper meanings. Teenagers and young adults often reflected on the film through the lens of identity and growth. Adolescence is a time of searching for one's place in the world, and Hogwarts provided a metaphorical version of that journey. Being sorted into houses, facing trials, and learning from mentors mirrored the real experiences of young people navigating school, friendships, and responsibilities. Many young viewers felt validated by the idea that even ordinary children could possess hidden strengths and make choices that defined who they were. Audiences also interpreted the film through the theme of loss and resilience. Harry's longing for his parents, embodied in the mirror of Ariste, resonated with viewers who had experienced grief. The story acknowledged the pain of absence while also affirming the possibility of hope, love, and community beyond personal loss. For some viewers, this was a powerful emotional connection, making the film not just entertaining but cathartic. The film also sparked reflections on morality and the choices individuals make. The Sorting Hat's suggestion that Harry might fit well in Slytherin led audiences to discuss the idea that one's destiny is not predetermined but chosen. This struck a chord with viewers across generations, reminding them that even in the face of pressure or predisposition, it is possible to define one's path through conscious choices. The film's moral clarity, that bravery, loyalty, and friendship matter more than ambition or greed, was interpreted as a timeless lesson, one that both children and adults could take to heart. Another layer of audience reflection emerged from cultural and societal interpretations. In the early 2000s, the world was grappling with new uncertainties, including global conflicts and shifting cultural landscapes. Many audiences found comfort in the film's portrayal of a world where good ultimately triumphed over evil, where communities stood against isolation, and where even the smallest individuals could make a difference. For some, this was more than fantasy. It was a form of hope during a time of uncertainty. Some audiences interpreted the film through the lens of nostalgia, even soon after its release. Those who had grown up reading the books experienced the film as a validation of their imagination. Seeing Hogwarts, Diagon Alley, and beloved characters on screen allowed fans to reflect on their own childhood experiences with the series. For them, the movie was not just an adaptation but a communal celebration of a story that had already shaped their lives. Over time, the reflections of audiences evolved. Those who were children in 2001 grew up alongside the actors and characters, and their interpretations of Sorcerer's Stone deepened as they matured. Revisiting the film as adults, many found themselves moved by aspects they had overlooked as children: the pain of Harry's loss, the moral ambiguity of choice, the symbolic meaning of the Sorcerer's Stone itself. This evolving relationship with the film has become part of its enduring legacy, as each new viewing can inspire new insights. Interpretations also varied across cultural contexts. In Western audiences, the film was often seen as a celebration of British heritage and storytelling, rooted in traditions of boarding schools, Gothic architecture, and mythic archetypes. In other parts of the world, audiences reflected on the universality of its themes. Children in Asia, Africa, and Latin America connected with Harry's journey of self-discovery, even if the cultural details were unfamiliar. The film's ability to transcend cultural boundaries demonstrated its universal appeal, making it a global story rather than one confined to British or American contexts. Fans also reflected on the communal aspect of the experience. Watching the film in theaters was often described as a collective event, with audiences gasping, laughing, and cheering together. This shared reaction created a sense of belonging, much like the houses at Hogwarts, where individuals found community through shared passion. Fans interpreted the film not just as a story on screen, but as a gateway into a global fandom where they could connect with others who felt the same way. There were also critical interpretations among audiences who questioned elements of the story. Some reflected on the way the Dursleys were portrayed, arguing that the exaggerated cruelty risked simplifying issues of neglect and abuse. Others reflected on the lack of diversity among the cast, questioning what it said about representation in mainstream fantasy films of the time. While these reflections did not diminish the love many felt for the film, they added complexity to the conversation, showing that audiences could both adore and critique the story simultaneously. Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone introduces audiences to a rich tapestry of characters, each of whom undergoes meaningful growth and development that shapes both the story and the emotional resonance of the film. While the film is a fantasy adventure, much of its power comes from its focus on character, their motivations, and the evolution of their relationships. The arcs of Harry, Ron, Hermione, and the supporting characters are carefully constructed to establish foundational themes that will continue throughout the series. Understanding these arcs provides insight into why audiences connect so deeply with the characters, seeing their journeys as reflections of universal experiences such as identity, courage, friendship, and morality. Harry Potter, as the central character, undergoes the most significant transformation. At the start of the film, he is isolated, timid, and uncertain of his place in the world. Living with the Dursleys, he experiences neglect, ridicule, and emotional suppression. This environment has instilled in him a sense of caution and self-doubt. He is unaware of his true heritage, and his perception of himself is limited to the narrow lens of his adoptive family's disdain. However, Harry's core qualities, curiosity, bravery, and moral integrity, emerge subtly in early scenes, such as his reactions to strange occurrences and his compassionate instincts toward others. These glimpses foreshadow the hero he will become. Harry's arc is defined by discovery and agency. The moment he learns he is a wizard and receives his letter to Hogwarts catalyzes a profound transformation. He moves from passivity into active engagement with his destiny. Throughout the film, Harry is presented with challenges that require both courage and intelligence. From learning to navigate the magical world to confronting Quirrell and Voldemort, he grows in self-confidence and moral understanding. By the film's climax, Harry demonstrates a maturity that extends beyond his years, acting decisively and selflessly to protect the Sorcerer's Stone. This development sets the stage for his continuing journey across the series, showing audiences that heroism is as much about choices as it is about innate talent or destiny. Ron Weasley's character provides a complementary arc that emphasizes loyalty, humor, and the value of teamwork. Initially, Ron is depicted as insecure, particularly in comparison to Harry and Hermione. He struggles with feelings of inadequacy, rooted in being one of many children in a modest family. His humor and occasional clumsiness mask these insecurities, making him relatable to audiences who have experienced self-doubt. Over the course of the film, Ron's courage emerges through action rather than self-perception. The giant chess sequence is a pivotal moment for Ron's character. He chooses to sacrifice himself for the greater good, demonstrating bravery, intelligence, and strategic thinking. This act signifies a critical development in his arc, showing that his value is not measured by status or confidence, but by loyalty, courage, and selflessness. Hermione Granger's arc revolves around intellect, resourcefulness, and the challenge of social acceptance. At the start, she is depicted as exceptionally knowledgeable, confident in her abilities, and eager to excel academically. However, she initially struggles with social integration, often facing criticism or dismissal from her peers for her assertiveness and insistence on rules. Hermione's development throughout the film is closely tied to her ability to balance intellect with empathy and teamwork. She learns to apply her intelligence collaboratively, particularly in the trio's efforts to overcome obstacles such as the troll, the challenges guarding the Sorcerer's Stone, and other tests of courage. By the end, Hermione has grown into a character who combines brilliance with pragmatism, empathy, and resilience, establishing the foundation for her continued role as a moral and intellectual anchor in the series. The dynamic between Harry, Ron, and Hermione is central to their individual arcs. Their interactions foster growth through shared challenges, differing perspectives, and the need to rely on one another's strengths. For example, Harry's bravery inspires Ron to act courageously, Hermione's intellect guides them through complex challenges, and their mutual loyalty ensures that no one faces obstacles alone. These interdependent relationships are carefully crafted to illustrate the importance of collaboration, trust, and friendship as mechanisms for personal growth. Albus Dumbledore's character serves as both a guide and a moral compass for Harry, subtly shaping his arc without direct intervention. While Dumbledore is enigmatic and distant, he provides key lessons that encourage reflection and self-awareness. His comment regarding the Mirror of Erist, that it is not due to dwell on dreams and forget to live, helps Harry understand the importance of balancing desire with action. Dumbledore's influence is primarily pedagogical, allowing Harry to internalize principles of responsibility, courage, and ethical decision-making, which are critical to his arc in this film and beyond. Hagrid's character contributes to Harry's development as well. Hagrid functions as a bridge between Harry's mundane life and the magical world, providing guidance, protection, and emotional support. Hagrid's warmth and trust validate Harry's sense of worth and belonging, offering him a model of loyalty, courage, and kindness. In terms of narrative arc, Hagrid remains relatively static, but his consistent presence allows other characters, especially Harry, to grow in confidence and self-assurance. Secondary characters also undergo subtle, but meaningful development. Draco Malfoy, for example, represents ambition, entitlement, and the potential for moral corruption. While his arc in this first film is limited, it sets up a foil for Harry and his friends, illustrating choices made from self-interest versus those made from integrity. Professor Snape's role is similarly complex, his motivations are ambiguous, and his cold demeanor challenges audiences to consider the depth and duality of character. These arcs are less about transformation and more about establishing narrative tension and moral contrast, which in turn catalyzes the growth of the protagonists. Quirrell, as the immediate antagonist, is defined by duality and deception. His outwardly timid, nervous demeanor masks the sinister presence of Voldemort, highlighting the theme of hidden danger. Harry's confrontation with Quirrell is pivotal for his arc. It represents the moment when he acts decisively against evil, testing his bravery, moral judgment, and willingness to sacrifice personal safety. Quirrell's arc serves as a catalyst for Harry's growth, underscoring the narrative principle that confrontation with moral challenges accelerates personal development. Harry's arc also encompasses emotional maturity. Throughout the film, he moves from passive observation to active engagement in problem-solving and conflict resolution. He begins to understand the value of sacrifice, the importance of loyalty, and the complexity of human motives. The Mirror of Eris sequence, the Troll incident, and the ultimate showdown with Quirrell all function as narrative benchmarks for his evolving emotional intelligence. By the end of the film, Harry exhibits a nuanced understanding of friendship, courage, and responsibility that contrasts sharply with his initial naivete. The visual world of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone is defined not only by cinematography and lighting but also by the meticulous attention to costume and set design. These elements work together to establish the film's sense of place, time period, character identity, and the overarching mood of the wizarding universe. Costume designer Judianna Makovsky and production designer Stuart Craig created a visual language that supports the narrative while immersing audiences in a magical world that feels tangible, lived in, and historically grounded. Their work balances practicality with fantasy, ensuring that characters' clothing and the environments they inhabit enhance the story rather than distract from it. Costume design plays a critical role in defining the personalities, social status, and affiliations of characters. The most iconic costumes are those worn by the students of Hogwarts. The robes of Gryffindor, Slytherin, Hufflepuff, and Ravenclaw are carefully tailored to convey tradition and hierarchy within the school. Gryffindor robes, for example, incorporate rich reds and golds, evoking warmth, courage, and loyalty. Slytherin robes are predominantly green and silver, signaling cunning, ambition, and subtle menace. These color-coded distinctions provide instant visual cues to the audience, reinforcing the characteristics associated with each house. Beyond the school robes, individual costumes highlight character traits and development. Harry's early wardrobe in the Dursleys' home is dominated by drab, ill-fitting clothing, emphasizing neglect and the oppressive environment in which he lives. The moment he receives his Hogwarts robes and other magical attire symbolizes not only entry into a new world, but also an emergence of identity and self-worth. Similarly, Hermione's precise, slightly formal school uniforms underscore her academic diligence and adherence to rules, while Ron's uniform, though correct, sometimes appears slightly oversized or casual, reflecting his more relaxed and humorous personality. These subtle distinctions communicate character information visually, without relying on exposition. Headwear and accessories also play symbolic and practical roles. The sorting hat, for example, is both a functional prop and a narrative symbol, reflecting themes of choice, identity, and destiny. Wands, quills, and satchels are carefully designed to feel authentic to the magical world, each crafted with attention to texture, proportion, and utility. These small details reinforce the realism of the fantasy, helping the audience to suspend disbelief and fully immerse themselves in Hogwarts. Costume design extends to adult characters as well, signaling authority, wisdom, or threat. Dumbledore's robes are layered, flowing, and often in pastel or metallic hues, suggesting both age and a gentle eccentricity. Professor McGonagall's tailored robes, dark and precise, communicate discipline and formality, while Quirrell's nervous, buttoned-up attire initially conveys timidity and subservience, masking the darker presence of Voldemort concealed within him. Even minor characters, such as the goblins at Gringotts or the ghostly figures of Hogwarts, are outfitted with costumes that emphasize character traits and narrative purpose. The set design of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone is equally integral to storytelling. Stuart Craig and his team built fully realized, immersive environments that range from the mundane to the fantastical. The Dursleys' home on Privet Drive is meticulously detailed, with rigid furniture, muted colors, and symmetrical architecture reflecting the oppressive and emotionally sterile environment. In contrast, Diagon Alley bursts with detail, color, and eclectic designs, with crooked buildings, varied textures, and whimsical storefronts that evoke a sense of wonder and discovery. The contrast between these sets visually communicates Harry's transition from an ordinary to a magical world. Hogwarts itself is one of the most ambitious and influential elements of the set design. The castle is presented as both majestic and approachable, combining Gothic architecture with cozy interiors. The Great Hall features high ceilings, long tables, and floating candles, creating a sense of scale and wonder. The common rooms are designed to reflect the personalities of the houses, with Gryffindor's warm fireplaces and comfortable furnishings contrasting with the darker, more austere Slytherin spaces. Staircases, corridors, and secret passageways add a sense of discovery and adventure, reinforcing the film's themes of exploration and curiosity. Practicality and realism were prioritized alongside fantasy. Sets were constructed to be navigable by the actors, allowing dynamic camera movement and interactive performances. Props were detailed and tactile, from potion bottles and spellbooks to magical creatures like Hedwig and Fluffy. These elements made the environment feel lived in, enhancing the believability of the wizarding world. The production team's attention to scale, texture, and functionality ensured that every object served both aesthetic and narrative purposes. The combination of costume and set design is particularly evident in key sequences. The Sorting Hat ceremony uses layered set pieces, costumes, and props to emphasize tradition, ceremony, and suspense. The interplay of robes, candlelight, and towering architecture amplifies the emotional stakes of the moment, allowing audiences to feel the grandeur and tension simultaneously. Similarly, the Quidditch pitch combines practical construction with imaginative design, ensuring that the action sequences are visually coherent and exhilarating while still grounded in a plausible magical environment. Lighting and color are reinforced through design choices. Sets and costumes are carefully coordinated with cinematography to convey mood and symbolism. Warm tones dominate scenes of friendship and triumph, while shadows and muted colors accentuate moments of danger or suspense. These visual cues guide audience interpretation, creating an emotional rhythm that parallels the character's development and the unfolding narrative. The design of magical artifacts further emphasizes thematic elements. The Mirror of Ariste, the Sorcerer's Stone, and various enchanted objects are carefully crafted to communicate both their function and symbolic significance. The mirror's ethereal quality, for example, is accentuated by reflective materials, soft textures, and careful integration with lighting, enhancing the scene's emotional and narrative impact. The Sorcerer's Stone itself is designed to appear ancient and precious, reinforcing its central role in the story and the stakes involved in protecting it. Even minor spaces, such as Hagrid's hut, the Forbidden Forest, and the train to Hogwarts, receive careful attention to design. Hagrid's hut is cozy, cluttered, and earthy, reflecting his personality and contrasting with the formal architecture of the school. The Forbidden Forest is shadowy, layered with textures and atmospheric effects, signaling danger and mystery. The Hogwarts Express train, with its polished carriages and detailed interior, serves as a transitional space between the mundane and magical worlds, reinforcing the journey motif central to Harry's arc. The dialogue and scriptwriting in Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone play a crucial role in defining characters, establishing tone, and driving the narrative forward. The screenplay, adapted from J.K. Rowling's novel by Steve Kalobs, faces the unique challenge of condensing a densely layered book into a 2.5-hour film while maintaining the richness of the original story. The success of the adaptation lies in its ability to translate complex characters, intricate plot lines, and imaginative magical concepts into dialogue that feels natural, engaging, and accessible for audiences of all ages. One of the most notable aspects of the script is its balance between exposition and character-driven conversation. Because the story introduces an entirely new magical world, audiences need to understand rules, relationships, and locations quickly. However, Kalob's writing avoids excessive or clunky exposition by integrating explanations into dialogue naturally. For example, when Harry first enters Diagon Alley, conversations between Hagrid and Harry reveal the function of shops, the importance of wizarding currency, and the magical properties of items without feeling forced. The dialogue allows information to flow organically, providing context while revealing character traits and emotions. Character voice is a defining feature of the script. Each main character speaks in a manner consistent with their personality, social background, and age. Harry's dialogue is often cautious, curious, and thoughtful, reflecting his initial uncertainty and humility. Ron's lines are humorous, self-deprecating, and occasionally impulsive, highlighting both his insecurities and his loyalty. Hermione's dialogue is precise, formal, and assertive, illustrating her intelligence, diligence, and sometimes rigid adherence to rules. This differentiation ensures that each character feels distinct and memorable, even to audiences encountering them for the first time. Humor is carefully integrated throughout the dialogue, often through wit, timing, and character interaction. For example, the playful banter between Ron and Hermione provides levity amid tense situations, while Hagrid's fondly awkward speech injects warmth and comic relief. These humorous moments serve multiple functions. They deepen character relationships, provide emotional pacing, and make the magical world more approachable for audiences. The humor is particularly effective because it arises naturally from character traits rather than relying solely on external jokes. The script also uses dialogue to establish relationships and hierarchies. The interactions between students and professors, or between Harry and the Dursleys, communicate power dynamics and social norms. For instance, the curt, often dismissive dialogue of the Dursleys underscores their oppressive nature, while Dumbledore's cryptic and philosophical lines establish him as a figure of wisdom and authority. Similarly, Malfoy's arrogant and condescending speech contrasts sharply with Harry's modest, sincere dialogue, emphasizing rivalry and moral divergence. These contrasts allow audiences to quickly understand relationships and conflicts without relying heavily on narration. Narrative tension and pacing are achieved through a combination of dialogue and visual storytelling. The script strategically employs conversations to escalate suspense, foreshadow future events, or reveal critical information. For example, the trio's discussions about the challenges guarding the Sorcerer's Stone build anticipation and highlight their differing approaches to problem-solving. Hermione's logical, methodical contributions contrast with Ron's impulsive, intuitive reasoning and Harry's reflective observations, creating a dynamic interplay that drives the plot forward while maintaining character consistency. Memorable lines are abundant in the script, and many have entered the broader cultural lexicon. Phrases such as, "You're a wizard, Harry," and "It is not due to dwell on dreams and forget to live," are immediately recognizable and resonate because they encapsulate character arcs, themes, or narrative turning points succinctly. The script balances accessibility with depth, ensuring that lines are meaningful without becoming overly dense or esoteric. This is particularly important for younger audiences, who must grasp the stakes and emotional undertones of the story while being entertained. The dialogue is also notable for its capacity to convey subtext. Many lines serve dual purposes, communicating both surface-level meaning and deeper thematic resonance. For example, Dumbledore's casual remarks often carry subtle moral or philosophical implications, encouraging audiences to reflect on broader concepts such as choice, destiny, and responsibility. Similarly, Quirrell's nervous, stammering speech conceals the underlying threat posed by Voldemort, allowing tension and suspense to build through dialogue alone. This layering of meaning enhances the narrative without relying solely on visual effects or action sequences. The scriptwriting excels in the construction of key sequences, ensuring that dialogue heightens drama and emotional impact. The Mirror of Eris scene demonstrates this skill, as Harry's brief exchanges with Dumbledore communicate profound insights into desire, loss, and self-understanding. Every word is carefully chosen to convey meaning while maintaining the pacing and atmosphere of the scene. Likewise, the climactic confrontation with Quirrell balances exposition, moral stakes, and emotional intensity through concise, impactful dialogue. Harry's lines in this sequence reveal courage and integrity, while Quirrell's stammering and underlying menace heighten tension. The film's dialogue also effectively establishes tone. Kalos manages to maintain a balance between childlike wonder and serious moral stakes. Whimsical lines describing magical creatures, spells, or settings coexist with moments of genuine peril or ethical reflection. This tonal balance ensures that the film is accessible to children while still engaging older audiences, a challenge that many adaptations struggle to achieve. The dialogue bridges the gap between fantasy and relatability, allowing viewers to invest emotionally in characters and story. Exposition-heavy sequences, such as lessons in potions, charms, or flying, are carefully structured to avoid stagnation. The script often intersperses instruction with humor, conflict, or curiosity-driven questions. This prevents scenes from feeling didactic and instead makes them engaging and character-driven. Hermione's precise explanations often prompt humorous responses from Ron or reflective questions from Harry, creating dialogue that entertains while advancing understanding of the magical world. The dialogue is further enriched by attention to linguistic style and consistency. Wizarding terminology, Latin-based spell names, and invented vocabulary are introduced naturally, allowing audiences to accept them as part of the world. The script avoids overwhelming viewers with information, instead sprinkling terms into contextually meaningful exchanges. This careful integration enhances immersion, making the magical environment feel authentic and lived in. The marketing and promotion of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone played a pivotal role in transforming the film from a book adaptation into a global cultural phenomenon. Warner Brothers and its marketing teams understood that the film's success depended not only on delivering a high-quality cinematic experience, but also on cultivating anticipation, building brand identity, and creating a sense of communal excitement that would draw audiences of all ages to theaters. The strategies employed were multifaceted, combining traditional advertising, innovative cross-media campaigns, merchandising tie-ins, and immersive experiences to ensure that Harry Potter became more than just a movie. It became a lifestyle and an event. One of the first key elements of the promotion was strategic trailer and teaser distribution. Early trailers emphasized both the magical world and the central narrative of Harry's discovery of his identity. They balanced wonder and intrigue, highlighting iconic elements such as Diagon Alley, Quidditch, and Hogwarts Castle, while carefully revealing plot points to entice fans without spoiling surprises. Trailers were placed across television, cinemas, and later on the early internet, ensuring maximum reach. The emphasis was on spectacle, but with enough focus on character and story to appeal to children and adults alike. The trailers cultivated curiosity and anticipation, positioning the film as a must-see event for both fans of the book and general audiences. Print advertising also played a crucial role. Posters, billboards, magazine spreads, and newspapers featured iconic imagery that emphasized both magic and character. Harry, Ron, and Hermione were prominently displayed, often in dynamic poses or surrounded by magical elements. Visual motifs such as the sorting hat, flying broomsticks, and the Great Hall were used consistently across marketing materials, reinforcing the visual identity of the film. These images established a recognizable brand that could be leveraged across multiple platforms, creating visual familiarity and excitement for the upcoming release. Television appearances and interviews were strategically timed to maintain interest. The young cast, alongside key members of the production team, participated in interviews on talk shows, morning programs, and special events. These appearances emphasized the authenticity of the young actors, their excitement about the magical world, and behind-the-scenes insights into the production. Audiences were drawn to the personal stories of the cast, deepening emotional investment in the film and its characters. The promotional tours often included international stops, ensuring that global audiences felt connected and anticipating the release simultaneously. The marketing campaign extended into cross-media tie-ins, most notably with publishing. The release of the first Harry Potter film coincided with special editions of the books, often featuring the film's visual branding, images from key scenes, and promotional content. Bookstores became hubs of activity, combining the excitement of a literary event with the allure of cinematic spectacle. This strategy strengthened the symbiotic relationship between the books and the film, driving both readership and ticket sales. Fans who had read the books were drawn to the movie to see beloved characters brought to life, while those introduced to the story through the film were encouraged to explore the novels, reinforcing engagement across media. Merchandising was integral to the promotional strategy. Warner Brothers recognized early on that the film's magical elements could be transformed into tangible consumer experiences. From wands and robes to plush toys, board games, and collectible cards, the merchandise allowed fans to interact physically with the story. The release of toys, replicas, and themed clothing created excitement in stores and households, reinforcing brand identity and fostering a sense of ownership among fans. Merchandising campaigns were timed carefully to coincide with holidays, back-to-school seasons, and theatrical release windows, maximizing visibility and revenue. Licensed video games were another extension of the marketing plan. Early adaptations for consoles and personal computers allowed fans to engage directly with the wizarding world. These games emphasized exploration, puzzle solving, and magical learning, mirroring the film's narrative and themes. By providing interactive experiences, the marketing campaign expanded the film's reach beyond passive viewing, encouraging deeper emotional and intellectual engagement with the story. Promotional partnerships with brands and media outlets further amplified the film's visibility. Fast food chains, toy companies, and retail stores offered limited edition items, contests, and giveaways that tied directly into the film. These collaborations created multiple touchpoints for fans, from cereal boxes to clothing lines, generating ongoing buzz and conversation. By positioning the film in everyday spaces, marketing efforts ensured that Harry Potter remained top of mind for audiences leading up to the release. The film's premiere events and screenings were carefully orchestrated to create spectacle and media coverage. Red carpet events included the cast, crew, and notable public figures, drawing press attention and generating excitement on television and in print. Interactive events, such as wizarding-themed experiences or fan contests, encouraged audience participation and reinforced the communal aspect of the film. These experiences enhance the perception of Harry Potter as an event rather than just a movie, cultivating emotional investment and anticipation. Early internet marketing was also leveraged effectively, reflecting the growing role of digital media in the early 2000s. Fan sites, official movie websites, and online forums provided previews, character bios, interactive games, and downloadable content. These platforms allowed fans to engage with the story directly, discuss theories, and share excitement globally. The online presence helped to create a sense of community, connecting viewers who were geographically dispersed and amplifying word-of-mouth promotion. In addition to broad marketing strategies, Warner Brothers also emphasized the experiential elements of the film. Themed displays in cinemas, collectible tickets, and promotional events allowed audiences to feel immersed before even entering the theater. These efforts created a sense of ritual and anticipation, turning moviegoing into an experience that extended beyond the screen. By establishing these patterns early in the franchise, The studio laid the groundwork for similar promotional strategies for sequels and other blockbuster franchises. Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone can be understood more fully when examined in comparison to other films within the fantasy genre, earlier adaptations of literary works, and subsequent entries in the Harry Potter franchise. A comparative analysis highlights the unique narrative strategies, visual style, character focus, and thematic depth that differentiate the film while also situating it within a broader cinematic and cultural context. This approach allows audiences and scholars to understand not only what the film achieved, but also how it influenced and was influenced by similar works. First, when compared to earlier literary adaptations, such as Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings films or Disney's live-action adaptations, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone stands out for its balance of accessibility and fidelity to source material. Unlike The Lord of the Rings, which condensed a densely mythic narrative into high-stakes epic storytelling with considerable compression and alteration of plot, Harry Potter retained the structure and tone of Rowling's novel while still allowing for cinematic pacing. Where Disney adaptations often took significant liberties with plot and tone to appeal to a broader family audience, Harry Potter respected the narrative integrity of its source, preserving character interactions, plot twists, and magical lore. This fidelity helped establish trust with fans of the book, demonstrating that major franchises could honor the original material without compromising cinematic appeal. In terms of visual style, Harry Potter differs notably from contemporaneous fantasy films. While the Lord of the Rings films relied heavily on grandiose, sweeping landscapes and high fantasy aesthetics to convey epic stakes, Sorcerer's Stone emphasizes intimate, immersive environments such as the corridors of Hogwarts, Diagon Alley, and the common rooms. These sets provide a sense of everyday magic, grounding fantastical elements in spaces that feel lived in. This contrast reflects differing narrative priorities. Where Lord of the Rings focuses on epic heroism and large-scale conflict, Harry Potter prioritizes character growth, interpersonal relationships, and discovery within a structured magical society. By comparison to other early 2000s fantasy adaptations, such as the Chronicles of Narnia, Sorcerer's Stone establishes a uniquely detailed and coherent magical world that feels consistent across sequences, enhancing audience immersion. When comparing Harry Potter to other child-focused fantasy franchises, such as the Percy Jackson series or Eragon, the Sorcerer's Stone distinguishes itself through the development of character agency and moral complexity. While many children's fantasy adaptations simplify conflict and reduce character arcs to basic notions of good versus evil, Harry Potter presents nuanced motivations. Even in this first installment, characters face ethical dilemmas and personal choices that affect the narrative. Harry must decide whether to confront Quirrell directly, Ron must assess the risks and value of loyalty, and Hermione must balance intellect with empathy. This focus on character-driven decisions sets the film apart from other adaptations that rely primarily on action or spectacle. Within its own franchise, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone occupies a unique position in terms of tone and narrative approach. As the introductory film, it emphasizes wonder, discovery, and the establishment of foundational relationships, world-building, and moral principles. In comparison to later entries, such as Prisoner of Azkaban or The Half-Blood Prince, the first film is lighter in tone, less visually dark, and more pedagogically structured. Later films explore deeper psychological and ethical conflicts, employ more complex cinematography, and present darker visual motifs. The first film's comparative restraint is therefore strategic. It builds familiarity and emotional investment, preparing audiences for progressively more mature thematic content. When viewed alongside its sequels, Sorcerer's Stone functions as a narrative and emotional anchor, establishing character trajectories, relationships, and the moral universe that the series will explore. From a directorial perspective, Chris Columbus' work on Sorcerer's Stone contrasts with directors of subsequent films such as Alfonso Cuarón, Mike Newell, and David Yates. Columbus prioritizes clarity, warmth, and accessibility, resulting in a film that is visually bright, character-focused, and narrative-driven. Cuarón's Prisoner of Azkaban, by contrast, experiments with darker tones, unconventional camera angles, and thematic subtlety, emphasizing psychological tension and complexity. These contrasts demonstrate how the series evolves stylistically while maintaining narrative continuity. By comparison to other film series directed by multiple directors, Sorcerer's Stone shows the importance of establishing a consistent visual and tonal baseline early in a franchise. It provides a familiar world that subsequent directors can build upon, experiment with, and deepen without losing audience connection. In terms of marketing and franchise building, the film also compares favorably with other major releases of the era. Unlike some contemporary fantasy films that relied primarily on box office spectacle, Sorcerer's Stone combined cinematic release with a coordinated transmedia strategy. Tie-ins included merchandise, video games, and book promotions, creating a multi-layered engagement that few adaptations had achieved at the time. This approach is comparable to Star Wars in terms of commercial strategy, but distinct in its integration of literary fidelity, family-friendly tone, and immersive world-building. The comprehensive marketing strategy helped establish Harry Potter as both a cinematic and cultural brand. A comparative lens also highlights differences in thematic approach. While many fantasy films simplify the battle between good and evil, Sorcerer's Stone explores the nuances of personal growth, courage, and friendship. Characters are defined not only by their roles in the central conflict, but also by their individual decisions and moral reasoning. This focus on character ethics sets the film apart from other high fantasy films where heroism is often inherited or predestined rather than earned through choice. Additionally, the film's approach to mentorship and authority figures, particularly Dumbledore, contrasts with other narratives in which guidance is more didactic or overtly authoritarian. The film emphasizes subtle moral guidance, allowing young audiences to reflect on ethical lessons within the context of engaging adventure. In a broader cultural comparison, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone differs from earlier children's fantasy films such as Matilda, The Neverending Story, or Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. While those films often present a singular protagonist navigating extraordinary circumstances, Sorcerer's Stone establishes a communal framework of house affiliation, collaborative problem-solving, and social hierarchy. This creates a more complex social dynamic within which character development and conflict unfold. The film emphasizes collaboration and friendship as mechanisms for growth, contrasting with the more individualistic journeys of earlier adaptations.